This is Dave of Live Life Loud, the Decibolic Podcast, and you're listening to Pods Like Us with Marv.
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I am talking with somebody who you have all heard multiple times already on the show from Live Life Loud, the Decibolic Podcast, my friend Dave Belknap. How are you, Dave?
Marv, I'm doing great today. Thanks for having me back on and for being able to put up with me as the only interview on your podcast for once.
Yes, everybody's heard you already on the show, and only now are they finding out everything that they need to know. Well, unless they're listening to your show, of course.
Yeah. Which they can always pop over and do on their own accord. But yeah, a little different. A lot of fun. How are you doing, Marv?
I'm doing okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Well, I am honored. Thank you.
So, how were you introduced to the world of podcasting in the first place, Dave?
Amazingly enough, I never really listened to lots of podcasts too much before I got going. And it first came about because I use everybody's favorite platform to hate, Spotify. And on Spotify, I would get what was called a daily mix. And the daily mix would give me news, information, along with songs that I might be interested in listening to. And when I was traveling a lot, I just put that on the phone and have it transferred to the car and listen. And in addition to some radio news sources that would come up, I would get little tidbits about financial info from another group and found that they had a podcast. So I'd listen to their little 5-minute segment on my daily mix. And then once a week, I go back and listen to their entire show. So that's what kind of introduced me to podcasting. And after that, honestly, I found a guy that was very entertaining to me, very interesting, because his show featured a host of different people that he would interview by the name of Chris Jericho.
Okay.
The Painmaker, popular professional wrestler around the world. He's been in New Japan, WWE, AEW, all the big ones.
Yeah.
So listening to him. And for the past 3 years, I was traveling on the road full time, and I was a presenter for a company that produced audio gear for doing recording, live sound, mixing, etc. And about once a month, I'd get somebody who would come up to me after the end of me doing a presentation, and besides them congratulating me and saying, "Wow, you really have it together," they would come up and tell me, "Have you ever thought about doing a podcast?"
Okay.
And I'm like, "I really haven't." And finally, my lightning fast brain, after about the 5th time, said, I should probably look into actually doing a podcast. And that's how I got started in the wide world of podcasting during the pandemic, when everything closed down. And I really wasn't sure what the next steps were I was going to take professionally.
Wow. So you've led into the next bit then, which is the history to the show and how you would describe the show.
For Live Life Loud, I am a segment or a variety show. My goal is to have a decent sized episode every time, probably around the length of a typical sitcom show like The Office. So not taking up usually more than 30 minutes of anyone's time, but I do about half of it is typically an interview, and I sprinkle in other things like deep shower thoughts. I'm getting ready to do Old English insults, and I also do things called like the gear in here, where I talk about the actual gear that I use in my studio area for recording, for playing guitar. And I also married that with the 3 years I spent on the road traveling. I used to do a little thing on Facebook called the 5'4" report, because that's my height. And, my perspective from the road, okay. I'm like, well, I've got a great amount of material, and rather than just putting it into words on a blog that only some people can get access to, why don't I make that into a section of my podcast and, go through the states, go through the areas I've been in, so people can experience what I got to experience on the road, and hopefully find some helpful tips and insight along the way for their own personal travels. And that morphed into what is now known as Travel Time.
Right. Yep. Because I've heard all that. I love the fact that you explain, like, because you go through your top favorite hotels in different states that you've been in, and I find that fascinating. How you'll explain what these hotels provide and what the actual hotel rooms are like and everything. I think that's great information and helpful to anybody that travels, basically.
Thank you. Yeah. And even if it's somebody who occasionally travels, but they might find themselves like going to a state or going into Ontario, Canada, then hopefully what I provided on the site or on the podcast, they'll be able to find that and make that useful. So now I'm in the process of trying to kind of do an index on my own website that I have, so that people can go and say, okay, well, I want to hear more about Wisconsin. I can go to this episode, or I want to hear about Michigan. I can go to this episode, and so on and so forth. So the overarching goal is to make it both a database and a way to push the podcast, but a podcast that can also push people to come and enjoy the information, hopefully find useful information for themselves on the site as well.
I was about to ask, actually, if you keep preempting everything that I'm asking you. It's like you're a professional and you know what you're doing and you're expecting, what I'm going to ask. I was about to say, so the information that you give in the shows, that's on the website, then you've got a log of all this information on there as well.
Yeah, that is in the works right now, to have an easily usable database. And that's what I'm figuring out, is to how to, at first it's just going to be right there, it's going to be Wisconsin, but eventually I'd like to have it so there's like a database page. You can type in Wisconsin and it'll bring up the episodes of Wisconsin and what's in those episodes. Yeah.
Okay. And links to all those places that you mentioned in Wisconsin as well, I would have thought.
Oh, absolutely. Once they start paying me for that, absolutely.
Yes. Making money from doing what you love. Who would have thought it?
Affiliate programming. I mean, I've always had and this might preempt another one. I've always had a penchant for being able to figure out how to use what I have to support what I love. And that started from the early days of eBay to a brief transition with the big bookseller Amazon, to working with a stateside company here that's now gaining momentum called Reverb, where they sell just musical equipment. So whatever I've not been using or really don't want to keep around, I've managed to offload and supplement my studio work. And that's how pretty much I've paid for what I'm doing, is something I'm not using. Okay, put it up for sale. Somebody buys it, off it goes, and that money goes back into the kitty to make the next project happen.
Okay, so explain to people then in more detail your background, because I think that plays into, well, the things that you know about equipment that you go into detail with, and the people that you interview as well, because you've made relationships with those people through the job that you do.
Yeah, my earliest meetings with some of these people was as far back as 30 years ago in a little town called Traverse City, Michigan.
Okay.
At that time, I got to meet some amazing studio artists who had semi-retired and moved back to their hometown area. One by the name of Roger Tarkson, an amazing drummer, and his brother Phil is his equal on guitar. Just two amazing people. You may never have heard of Roger's name, but if you've listened to David Crosby, you've heard Roger play.
Okay.
And that's going to drop there. So from them, I began learning how to network and use my experience while working in that music store. Fast forward a little bit, I moved downstate a little bit with my family and went to work at a guitar shop. And there I started connecting with people and actually met a couple of the guys that I've interviewed through there who were either working there or people that were my clients. I even had the honor to see Joe Bonamassa's 1954 Stratocaster. That's like his favorite Stratocaster in the whole world.
Wow.
That I came through my shop and I got to take photos of it and play it for about 20 minutes before it went on its way to him. So that was kind of fun. But anyhow, so through that job, I ended up taking another opportunity with a major audio manufacturer. And that was where I really began to be able to get out more and travel throughout the United States and throughout Canada. And we do a lot of events like the National Association of Music Merchants in Anaheim, California. There, I probably have met well over 50 artists from all around the world. Ron Wood, Michael Anthony from Van Halen, George Lynch of Dokken, Paul Reed Smith himself, and it grows exponentially. Some amazing bass players that I'm totally missing the name on. One of the guys who is just awesome. I got to hang out with him for a little bit. And my good friend Dino Monoxylus, who is known as the Ampeg guy. So through all this travel, I got to meet a lot of people and use my skills of knowledge in musical equipment. So again, backing up a little bit to 30 years, I would run across the road from a warehouse I was working at and bug the owner of the store to death about different pieces of equipment or different parts that I needed for a guitar that I was building. And one day, after me doing this for about 3 weeks, he looks at me and says, "You seem to know a lot about this stuff. How would you like a job? And I'll pay you 25 cents more an hour than what they're paying you to get started." So I did that. And by the age of 19, I became the assistant manager of the store, ran it for 3 years. And that's what spiraled into the collection of my ever deepening knowledge that I had of music gear, professional equipment. And that allowed me to springboard into a lot of those relationships with various artists over the next 20 years.
Okay, so basically the guests are people that you've met in your life doing that work, such as Dino and the previous guest, Dylan Bowman?
Dylan Bowman of I Prevail. He actually worked with me for a short time at the guitar shop in Grand Rapids that we were together at. So yeah, a lot of it is through those kind of relationships. And some of the other guests that'll be coming up are relationships from those relationships where they've already allowed me to use into feedback or to actually talk on my behalf and say, "Hey, this was one of the best interviews and podcasts I've been on.
Yeah.
If he calls, do it."
Yeah, I think what helps with that is that you have that knowledge that you can fall back on, so you know what sort of questions or how to guide the conversations that you have with them. So it makes it easier that way. And because you're coming at it from that angle, you will have that level of respect from the people because they'll think, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yes, thank you. That is so true with that. And, I spent as much time developing over the last 6 months a lot of those skills. I'm very good, as you can tell already by this podcast episode. I'm very good at monologuing. That's what I was monologue. But I learned somewhere in between there how to monologue and then how to spin part of what I just said into a question. So now when I do interviews, it's a little bit the opposite. I might ask a question, they get started, but rather than me having to ask a question based off of what I just said or, what I might have scripted on the next roll, I'll pick something and find something that really seems to be important in the last couple of sentences or in what they've just told me. And figure, okay, this part is a vital piece. Let's pull that out and expound on it. And that's really helped me out with getting what I have out of my guests. And I enjoy the dynamic of the interview because when I'm on my own, I'm really critical of what I'm doing because I have more control over it. And in a case like this, I have less control over everything. So I seem to be a little more at ease. Also, I found it helps. If anyone has ever seen one of these digital programs that we use for recording, you'll see this consistent waveform trickling across your screen. And at times that can be like watching a golden retriever chase its own tail. Before long, you realize that has derailed you from whatever you're doing or how you were thinking. And instead, you're trying to keep time with this ever-growing little blip of graphic on your screen rather than actually concentrating on what you're wanting to say. So that helps me out a lot too.
Okay, so as a musician in bands, have you had to travel as well, or not so much?
With the bands, I've always had that fleeting wink with fame or with larger groups. Early 90s, I worked with an amazing gentleman by the name of Kenny Olson.
All right, yeah.
Some people know him better as the guitar player in the Twisted Brown Trucker Band of Kid Rock.
Yeah.
So Kenny was working with me when he got the call to go to Detroit and start working with Kid to make that happen. One of my other good friends, Brian Schramm, ended up meeting Kenny and Kid at Kenny's wedding, and he became the guitar player for Uncle Cracker.
Yep.
Dylan Bowman was in the midst of deciding what he wanted to do when he got the call to join I Prevail. And at the time, it was almost a hired gun situation. But the more that they got to know Dylan, the more he became a very vital and important part of that team. So I've always had that where I've pushed somebody. A good friend who I am hoping to interview soon is a guitar player for Leon Hendrix, Jimi Hendrix's brother, who is the rightful heir to the name.
Yep.
Not his awkward cousin who has stolen the family business. And he credited part of him ever getting into guitar was me making him a mixtape with some really cool guitar stuff on it before he left the school that we were in, and he moved with one of his parents to, I believe it was to Florida at that time. So I've kind of always been that strike that the match hit before the flame started. Myself personally, I've enjoyed sometimes with bands. I've worked a lot with younger people, talents that were just getting formed. So for me, it was being able to work with them in a musician's setting and getting them excited and continuing on their own path. But I really didn't tour a lot outside of just my local area as a young musician. It did just help me, though, to, I guess, expand and enjoy and have a camaraderie with people when it came time over the previous opportunity that I had for the last 3.5 years.
Okay, so with these friendships that you've got, do these people already know what sort of, not necessarily the questions themselves, but do they already have a guide that you've given them that shows how the conversation or the points that you're going to hit for sure in the conversation that you're going to have with them?
I do. I'm OCD about that. I don't want anything to really be a surprise to the guests that I have on the majority of the time. My good friend Justin, who will be coming in forthcoming episodes, was the first vocalist in a band I was in. So it was really easy to roll with him, and he had an idea of what was going on. But with Dino and with Dylan, I sent them literally about 2 pages of questions that, okay, these are sections that I want to talk about. Here's some questions in those sections. Let me know if something is off topic or something that we cannot discuss. Because like with Dylan, they're working on some new stuff. That's as much as he told me. With Dino working at Ampeg, they're always working on a product line 3 to 5 years in the future. So there's things that he can't tell me about that. But there'd be other personal questions. I'm like, is this a road that's okay to go down? Or is this something you would rather not discuss on our podcast? Just thinking from the aspect of this is not only my friend, this is my guest. And to follow that up is that if they don't enjoy their time and they feel blindsided, that's not going to look good for me when I go down the road for future interviews.
No, absolutely. So when you do those interviews then, I'm guessing that they are structured in a specific way so that you go from one to another, allowing for the occasional tangent that they might go off. So how do you structure it so that you can then separate it in a neat way to have those interviews over multiple episodes? Because an interesting thing about your show, because you said that it's almost like I think we call them in this country a magazine show or something, where you have different segments. So do you actually structure it so that you know where the points are to break for the next episode, or do you just let the conversation flow and then afterwards do that in post?
Yes.
Eventually I got there.
No, truthfully, I do have an idea.
Yep.
But I do skip around that idea from part to part. Just I have it out there, and that's one of the beauties about giving it to them in advance. They know where I want to go.
Yep.
But if they really seem to be veering towards let's say we started at 1 and they decide to veer down and 3 is where they're going instead of 2, then we'll go to 3.
Yep.
Then we'll come back to 2 later, or we might never get to 2. Sometimes if I give them 5 points of topics I want to talk about, we'll start at 5. It just depends on the person. And honestly, I don't always know what segment is going to be first, second, or third until after I've finished the conversation.
Right.
And sometimes they'll be talking about topic 1. We'll skip to topic 3, then we'll go back to topic 1. So if the flow works well enough, I'll take the topic 1s and push them together. If it just seems that 1 to 3 is a natural progression, we'll just go from 1 to 3 and then maybe start with number 1 again in the next episode. It just really depends a lot on how it flows and how it's feeling once I get the final interview recording finished from them. And to maybe add to the next part of that, there is typically about a 3 to 4 week time between when I do the interview and when I do the editing. And that's purposeful on my part, just so that way I've stepped away from it long enough that when I come back to it, it's fresh.
Yeah.
And it allows me to see things from a whole perspective rather than just going right in that moment. And now you've got something that might be a little choppy or dissonant. Instead, it allows me to, I guess you could say, better orchestrate the part of the episode, that portion that I'm bringing forward for my listeners to enjoy.
Right. So anyway, that leads then nicely into how do you actually pick the structure for your show then? How is it set out? Has it got a pattern that you have for every episode?
I do have a typical pattern that I use. I always do a little introduction. Mainly that introduction is going to focus around the upcoming interview at the end of the show. So I like to tell people what's going to happen with that. Part of that I really picked up from listening to Chris Jericho again.
Yep.
Do a great job of doing a little preface after he had recorded the entire interview. So he kind of tells you, okay, this is what's coming. And that's something I also learned at the same time in a lot of the speech classes and a lot of the English classes I took early on in life. School actually worked for me. And that is you tell people what you're going to tell them. You tell them what you are telling them. And then you tell them what you just told them. The only part I leave off for the interviews is the last, telling them what I just told them, because they've heard it and I want to leave it in a more natural setting for the next part of the episode to come on. But with that, being a little less political and getting to the actual question you asked me, I start off with that. Then I go into the deep shower thought. The deep shower thought will always happen until I run out of all 125 that I have. Yes, these are ones I actually wrote down on my notepad in my phone and have kept track of for over 5 years.
Okay.
Go from there. And depending on time, I'll either do a travel time segment, or I'll do the gear in here, which is the review part segment, or I'll do something a little different. Like in an episode that just released, I did a memorial for a couple of friends that have passed on during the time of production with Dino. People that Dino knew or people that I knew together with him.
Okay.
I did a special memorial segment and then we moved on. So that'll happen. And then the interview happens at the end. And if I don't have an interview, I might do, or don't want to do an interview, just want to give some space between all the interviews, I might do a couple of the segments back to back and then end the show. Or if the segment of the interview is just solid the way it is and I don't want to clip it, and it just doesn't seem to be a natural break for it, I'll go from the introduction and go right into that interview. Because again, my guiding principle for the podcast is to make sure I stay around or under half an hour every time.
So you record the interviews separately, and then the other bits, you do those as separate things as well. And because you've got all these different voices that you use, and how do you do all this?
So part of it comes from, again, just from me getting bored sometimes. Part of the multi-voices come from me watching skit shows like Saturday Night Live or Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. So different things like that where people were doing different characters. Rich Little, huge inspiration for me as a kid because he could do mimic those voices. And so for me, it was kind of fun to have in the example of my pilot episode and try to emulate the sounds of being 2 or 3 different people in the episode. So it sounded like 2 ring announcers talking back and forth. And that would come from anything from lowering the register of my voice to pinching my nose and trying to talk a little bit higher. Just simple things to change it up. And of course, I'd change the EQ on the mic. The amazing thing about digital audio is being able to ever so slightly and gently change what the sound is people are hearing. And it gives it just enough separation to make it different enough to really draw somebody into it being a conversation between two rather than it just being one person monologuing the entire time. So that's how that comes up, is just from my inspiration from watching variety shows like Saturday Night Live or watching The Tonight Show or whichever version you saw. So part of it comes from that. And I've always been, I went through drama in high school. Again, drawing from high school. Who would have thunk? So I use that ability to draw in and to play it into things. And sometimes an idea just comes together and I have to do it. So those different sounds and ideas will come into play. And I really have found that it's quite easy for me to bring those into a podcast setting.
So do you record those separately, or do you record them all as one and then do the effects on the voices at another time?
Oh yeah, the voices I do record. Well, actually, it depends on what it is, but normally I'll record the voices one right after another. They'll be short takes. So I'll do a short take with voice A, and then I'll do a short take with voice B, and then I edit them together. So for me, it just kind of keeps the monologue flowing a little bit easier that way. Also, I found that if I try to do it where I've recorded them separately and then try to splice them together, I'm not really a fan of it. Doesn't sound organic. Yep. So being able to portray those two or three people all in a row just helps it to keep that fluid structure that I personally want to hear. And for that, I am my own biggest critic. There have been times when I've probably done one deep shower thought, maybe 7 or 8 takes, just so I could get it to be the way that I wanted the voice to be for that part.
Yes, I've had to do that before with the intro to this show, where I've messed up the intro numerous times and just had to keep going for it. And then sometimes if you do it 2 or 3 times, then you get a problem that the guest starts laughing, then you mess it up as well. And yes, yep. So the amount of times that we all do these things, and then we have to. I'm sort of envious of people who can do a live stream and just go for it without any problems at all.
Right. That's one of the reasons why, for me starting off, I've got a plan for how I'm slowly rolling out the podcast. And that is my first year is all audio, just, pre-recorded audio, pre-done audio. 2, that also helps out because in this day and age, things can happen. You might not be able to get started right on time. The guest might have an issue that comes up at the last minute, and now you want to run and it leaves you hanging. So just because of that kind of thing, I mean, even what's the one that I really enjoyed watching recently? Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum.
Yeah.
Even his interviews are pre-recorded before everything's published. And it's insane what these guys have in the back working for them. But anyhow, moving off of that rabbit trail. Yeah, it's just a lot better for me to be able to do it that way. And so I do the recordings. My eventual goal is to start in the coming year is to do 2022 is to start doing some occasional live streams when I know it just is infallible to do, meaning I'll be able to have people actually here in the studio with me. And also somewhere around the end of that year, I'm hoping to begin, if everything keeps going in the direction it needs to be able to get into video streaming as well as live audio. So being able to have it on a YouTube or whatever platform while I have the guest on.
Yep. Okay, so you've led into the editing then, which I'm guessing is one of your favorite parts. So how do you go about doing that?
I am fortunate that by virtue of the piece of equipment that I have to have run across a very nice little program. And the program that came with really makes it easy for me to do the kind of audio editing that I need to. Unfortunately, I can't figure out a way to slow down time without it bugging me. So when I'm editing everything in real time, just like it sounds right now in this podcast.
Yep.
But what I figured out how to do with it is be able to stretch out the form just enough so that I can get rid of the occasional or the gulp or the weird noise that might otherwise detract from what's going on in the podcast. So I get a little nitpicky with my edits. For example, I recently edited a piece with Dino, and that piece started off at about 23 minutes. And by the time I was done getting the redundant phrases out of both of our speeches and getting it cobbled together where I wanted it, it ended up being roughly 14 minutes.
Yep.
And that's just a process of time of just identifying the pieces that need to be cut, cutting them, and then bringing the audio files closer together and matching them so that they are coherent and not choppy.
Yep, and cutting down where you've got occasional bits where there'll be dead air.
Oh, yeah.
It's natural that there will be pauses occasionally, so you might allow for a certain amount, but then once it goes over a certain length, it feels difficult, so you lose that, what I call the difficulty factor.
Yes.
Yep.
And you want right now, probably episode 2 is my worst episode for not leaving timing. But, it's the great thing about podcasting is you just have to grow and go with it.
Yeah.
And the fun is, at the same time, I can get OCD about things. I can get so OCD that they line up in the correct alphabetical order and become CDO. I do my best to leave things alone. I had one episode where I did the bit for it. I think it was for a travel time. And I ended up going back and re-recording the entire thing only because I had time to, only because I wasn't under pressure to finally get it released. I didn't need to. I just did.
Yeah.
The thing is they tell you, the first step in doing anything is doing it. So when it comes to getting this podcast rolling, I just released episode 7 by the time of this recording here, by the time of our conversation.
Yep.
And everyone has gotten easier to edit. Every episode has become easier to do. But it would never have gotten to this point if I hadn't just finally let something alone and moved on. For me, one of the biggest helps with that process has been putting myself on a must-have weekly episode release basis. So I have every Tuesday, a new episode has to be out. That's the end of the story. So I have to make sure that I am being efficient with my time and not taking 2 hours just to see, well, that space is just a little too long. That space is a little too short. That needs to be level matched a little bit better, and trying to not get into the minutia of that and actually just finally release it for people to enjoy. And so far, the reactions have been positive.
Like you said, it's a thing that comes with time, because I know with my own show that when that started, that looking back, I think there's bits where I could have been a bit more loose with the edits, but it's something that comes with time where you'll listen back to your shows, if you do, and you'll listen and think, yeah, I think I might have gone a bit over the top with that one. And it's a learning experience. You're constantly learning with this, but doing it.
Yeah, like for me is actually reading the chat messages that you sent me and going, okay, you have something here for me to read. I literally just looked back at the chat window and saw, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. That works well.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry, total rabbit trail there. Maybe
That's okay. I might leave that in because people. I've already mentioned that we're friends outside of this episode anyway.
And now, for those who don't know, Marv found me, and I was just kind of grateful that you, Marv, took the time to say, hey, you want to come do this? You want to do that? What do you think? And for me, I'm like, seriously, I'm just getting started. So being able to have met someone like you, let alone be able to be a part of this, has been a huge confidence booster for me. So I have to say thank you right here. And that has to definitely stand, because I am grateful for the fact that you have taken the time to invest and to build a good friendship with me. Marv and I have seen each other once on Zoom, and that was when the bandwidth allowed. But outside of that, we talk on Instagram a lot and Facebook, and I've been very fortunate for this relationship to come together. So thank you, Marv.
Yep. Thank you. I think, did I mention it in our chat with Gil that we had last week with Gil from the Mind Buzz? And I've said to other people that it's one of those relationships with yourself and with Gil, the relationships that that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't have just pushed myself to start doing a podcast myself. And then these relationships have built that wouldn't have been there beforehand. And I think they're really good, strong relationships, because I'm just shouting out Gil as well, because he seems to be someone who is also staying in touch with both of us. And in a way, it's three people that are always that we're sort of like egging each other on, and we've got each other's back, so to speak.
Exactly. And we do similar but different enough podcast genres that it just kind of makes a really cool strengthening, a real cool connection. I mean, I wouldn't even mind if we were all doing the exact same format, for crying out loud, but
No.
It's been really cool that here we are, three different people, three different ways of looking at a podcast. And that's what's going to really excite me when we all get to release our own individual episodes of our three-way conversations. Just to see how our different take on them. It's kind of like three different people drawing the same superhero. So it's that kind of a fun adventure that I'm looking for. But yeah, seriously, podcasting has allowed me to branch out, and actually is going back to the guest factor. It allowed me to reach out to some friends like Dino, Dylan, Justin, Steven, and just say, hey, I'm doing this. Any thoughts? Would you like to join? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, cool, do it. So it gave me a chance to reconnect with some people that I hadn't talked with, in about anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And, for me, it was great because I can be introverted. No doubt about that. That's probably why it makes podcasting easy for me to sit down and work here in my studio that I call the Guitar Grotto, which is a rebuilt area of my basement, and just allowing me to get down here, and I can work on that and not miss, having a conversation with somebody for a little bit. But, I also keep a time point to that. When my wife is home and when my youngest daughter gets home from school, I'm there. When my son gets home from school, I'm there with him.
Yep.
And everything's good to go. And, if I come back downstairs, it's for maybe another half hour tops. So, yeah.
That's great. So when you do your show, what sort of research do you do about the guest, and then about when you dive deep into the microphone situation in the first episode? What research do you do, and also how did you get that equipment? Did you have to buy it, or did you have that equipment given to you?
So at this point in time, I am a completely self-funded podcast. I am hoping to eventually gain supporters and to gain sponsorships, which I have absolutely zero of this early on in the game. So with that being said, yeah, I bought it all. When it came to the microphones, it actually was based on research that I did. And the first microphone that I bought that's featured in there was one of the first dynamic podcast microphones that was going to be available again for purchase that I could afford. So I bought it. I needed something to get started with. The other equipment I had, I just wasn't happy with it. Now, you don't have to start with a dynamic podcast microphone or whatever. It's always been embedded in me, and it was probably thanks to my dad, that if you do something, do it to the best ability you can. And I always saw that in our hi-fi stereo at home. I always saw that in the video equipment, VCR, television equipment, computer equipment that he's bought throughout the years, his cameras. And that kind of trickled into the way that I think even today. So it's always been, do the best you can with what you have. And I was fortunate enough, after buying that first microphone, that my sales rep from that company got a hold of me and said, hey, Shure's coming out with a brand new mic, and we got it. Are you interested? And I'm like, yeah, but I just bought this one. Well, fortunately for me, he's like, I'd really, because of the relationship I had with him, and again, working for that previous audio company, I had a relationship with this person who was selling me gear.
Yep.
So he's like, hey, I know that you will actually go through and review stuff, and I will get your honest take. So why don't I ship you the new microphone from Shure? You check it out against the microphone you have, and then you let me know your complete thoughts on it. And so I was able to return the other microphone, something you normally can't do. I was able to return the other microphone to him and it didn't, no restocking, no charges, just so that he could get firsthand account from me on what the differences were between the two and which one I ended up preferring at the end of the day. So I was fortunate in that, but everything else from my now 10-year-old laptop that we're using today to my MIDI keyboard and my studio speakers, all of that, my interface was all purchased by myself.
So when you interview people or talk with them, how do you talk with them? How is that done? Is that done over a Zoom meeting? How do you actually record those conversations?
The conversations that I have with the people on my podcast, I use Zoom as the initial meeting place. And really, if you both have Zoom or if you have Messenger and you're comfortable with using that, or if you both have a Apple product and you want to use FaceTime, that would work too for what I do. I use Zoom 90% of the time because everybody who has been in lockdown for the past half year, going on year, has had a touch with Zoom at some point. So it's very easy for people to understand. Now, the beauty that I have of it is, by courtesy of the software I use, I'm able to split my own voice from that of the person who's being recorded. Now, you don't have to do it the way I do. Mine's all records into my hardware, into my digital audio workstation. Zoom has a really cool feature that I learned about where it allows you to record everybody on a separate audio track. So that way you can have a little more separation, and it allows you to have more flexibility when it comes time to do the editing, if you even choose to edit your podcast.
Yep. For those people that want to know how you would do that Dave's just mentioned, is that you would go into your settings, not on the website browser version of Zoom, but on the downloaded software version of Zoom. You'll go into settings, into where it says recording, and then you've got your tick where it says record a separate audio file for each participant who speaks. And that will then give you a track for each individual person in that Zoom call. Sorry, I thought I'd elaborate a bit more on that, Dave, and explain a bit more.
That's great. That's why I wanted to stay quiet at the end, so that you could get that cut the way you wanted it. Absolutely.
So, Dave, the music for your show, how did you come about putting that in, the transitions and all the background music, the beds, as they call them in the professional word?
So I start with a riff or a concept, and then I embellish on it. With the introduction for my podcast, I actually started with the drums.
Okay.
I'm not a drummer by trade, but I am very thankful to have known an incredible drummer by the name of Roger Tarkson, who I talked about earlier. And Roger just gave me this innate sense of rhythmic and timing. So I would build MIDI tracks out of stuff like, I want this kind of a vibe, or I want it to be like this kind of a group sound. And what I did was I took that, and then okay, this is the kind of bass riff I want on it, and this is what I want for the guitar. And then I slowly built it upwards from that. So, either I'd be thinking I want it to be kind of quirky, kind of Offspring or Smash Mouth because it's really quirky, or I want something to be kind of more like a really kind of an edgy, fun, driving rock anthem. That was the loose idea in my head, and it doesn't always translate the way that I started thinking about it at first, which is also very fun and exciting. Like, I did a piece that I ended up calling Vying for Top Gun. And that's because if you listen to it, it so much sounds like, what if Steve Vai had written an intro for a Top Gun movie?
Wow.
And that's on my site, Decibolic. It's right there in the audio player on the main page. You can listen to it. Little 20-second blip. But, and that started off being more moody and dark. And all of a sudden it became this very anthematic buildup over 30 seconds. Other times I'll know, I want something like grungy. So I did gearing here, and I've got this little grungy thing that I did. And part of what helps me with that, besides being a guitar player, is I bought this little looper pedal. So I can write something down and I can kind of play over the top of it, noodle around and fuss with it before I commit it. And I just found having that little piece of hardware that's dedicated for a purpose is a lot easier sometimes than sitting down with a DAW in your face, because I always feel that pressure when I see those little waves forming from the audio when I'm doing a clip. So I try not to look at that kind of stuff. But that's what I did. And some of the bed music that I've done in podcasts actually started off as a drum track. And because it was MIDI, I would change it to, okay, what would this sound like instead of drums if this was being played on a B3 organ?
Yep.
And we just muddle around with that just to see, okay, so now I've got this drum track, but now it's actually being played by a keyboard. So it gives it a little more fun, a little bit lighter tone, a little less dynamic. So hopefully it doesn't detract as much from what I'm saying over the top of it.
Okay, so I'm now thinking of Steve Vai doing a Top Gun theme. It's been in my head ever since you said that. If the new Top Gun film, Maverick, doesn't have Steve Vai doing the music, I'm going to be very disappointed now.
All right. Hashtag Steve Vai for Top Gun.
Yep. Absolutely.
I know, but just kind of came for that because that was one of the first solos that I, really enjoyed playing around with. I always enjoyed doing stuff with music thematic soundtrack and learning how to play those as a kid. So the Top Gun solo was one of the first things I learned.
Wow. Okay. Oh, the main theme. That is a beautiful theme, actually.
Yeah. Just and once you figure it out, and that was like one of the first things that I learned how to play by ear. So it was a crowning moment of, ooh, look at what I can do.
Yeah, it's weird because you've got themes like that are memorable, but I mean, I love the, as I'm sure everybody that knows me knows, I love the Marvel universe, but they've got really good music, but there's nothing that's really there except for the Avengers theme, but it's only there for that short moment, like 30, 40 seconds, and then it's gone. There's nothing actually that memorable about that many of the Marvel films. Theme-wise, there's no... Do you know what I mean?
I sure do. And immediately I thought of contrasting that to the Disney-made version of The Lone Ranger.
Okay.
With Armie Hammer and Johnny Depp, where for somewhere in 20 minutes of the show, all you hear is the Lone Ranger theme in the background. And it's like, can you please move on?
The William Tell Overture, as it's properly called.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, I don't know if I can watch this scene anymore because this song just needs to stop. So I'd actually mute it on my TV.
They could have utilized it in there, but just not used it as much as they did.
Yeah, or done the emo thing and made it kind of darker and stretched out over time instead of playing it at the actual BPM that William Tell scored it at. There's lots of things you could do with music just to use the same thing and stretch it and elasticize it and make it more usable in a variety of settings.
That's true. I mean, in the original Mission Impossible film, you've got the two people from the two not so famous people from U2, Adam Clayton and Larry Mullen Jr. They're doing the Mission Impossible theme, but they're doing it in 4/4 as opposed to it's 5/4, and they've got a dance beat to it in the background. So that's looking at it from a different angle.
Right.
It's the same as you'll find John Williams does it brilliantly through a lot of his films. He'll have a specific theme, and as you go through the film, a little bit of that theme or whatever will be dotted throughout. And you've also got it on Pink Floyd's The Wall, where you'll have like little touches of The Wall guitar. You'll have bits from all the different film songs from the Pink Floyd album The Wall, and they'll sort of like reappear, like little motifs will appear here and there dotted around other songs.
Yes.
But in a different way.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's so easy to do that, especially this day and age. I mean, hey, you could, if you score something in MIDI, you can take it, and this is maybe why they don't do it, because you can take it if you put it in MIDI and you can transpose it to a different key if you want to. And you can make it a little slower, a little darker sounding, a little more ominous. And if you put it in a minor, and it might work, it might not, depending on the song and the writing. But there's so many different ways that you can even creatively do that without having to resort to Melodynes and all the glitch stuff they do, like the overuse of voice tracking as done by Cher in a couple of her songs in the 80s, like Do You Believe in Life After Love?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's another rabbit trail for us. Music. Yeah. So I like to often think about groups, people that influence me, and then I try to put them out of my head so that I don't consciously rip them off. That is such a big stink these days that, if you play something too close or using the same chord progression, you got to watch out because, if it ever hits big enough, then people come back and say, oh, yeah, by the way.
Yeah.
Like it totally blew my mind because of the laws in Australia that men at work got hammered for using the Kookaburra song.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
That was horrible.
I thought that as well. But that song that you're on about, Down Under, it's one of those cases where the person that wrote the song actually doesn't like the song that much anymore, does he? I think he gets fed up a bit. Colin Hay.
That's understandable. I mean, yeah, Funk 49 for Joe.
Right.
Who wrote the song, Funk 49. That is like one of his least favorite things in the world to play now.
Lemmy, while he was alive, from Motorhead, he hated the song Ace of Spades, which was their most, best-selling song. And he hated it.
Oh, yeah.
Even though he wrote it.
Used in the Western Decline of Civilization Part 2 movie. Yeah, it was all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an interesting version of that, actually, that's acoustic with him doing harmonica and guitars with it, acoustics, which is very different in a bluesy style.
Yeah, see, that's fun.
Yeah.
Revisit some of the stuff you've done, make it different, and make it palatable.
Sidestepping slightly.
Okay.
What would you say are your biggest influences musically, like bands that you listen to or artist?
Sure. The Cure.
Yep.
I have to tip my hat to Robert Smith for playing the outrageous solo called The Kiss on Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me when I finally flipped over the tape as a kid. And that day I had to go out and have a guitar. My viola went away and my guitar showed up. That's the short story. Yellow, because I really enjoy experimental stuff. So having something that's not traditional, not pop music. I love pop music, by the way. Duran Duran. Mm. So we've got Duran Duran, we've got Yellow, we've got The Cure, we've got Steve Vai / Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
And those are probably the biggest overall influences on my music today. I mean, others have come and gone, but those are the main ones. For guitar, I love listening to people that I could never emulate. So there we go again, Steve Vai, because I cannot play like him, nor can I play like Reb Beach, one of the most underrated guitar players ever, who has done stuff for David Coverdale and Whitesnake, and is back with Kip Winger doing the band Winger.
Wow. The man that has the bass guitar that looks like a machine gun. That's Kip Winger, is it? Am I right?
Could be. I'd have to look that up. I know Kip, at first, everyone thought that he couldn't play, that he was just a really good dancer, but no one ever really dug back far enough to find out he actually used to be the bass player for Alice Cooper at one point.
Yeah, it's a bit like, I think people underrate Michael Anthony's bass playing as well. With Van Halen and Sammy Hagar's bands. I think he's a great bass player that's so underrated and overlooked.
Agreed.
And not about the instrument that he plays, but also Michael Anthony's harmonies. I think when they came back with the reunion album, I think it missed Michael Anthony's harmony vocals, because his harmony is absolutely gorgeous. He's got that real high vocal range. I think it's missing.
I totally agree. His ability, like on the song Running with the Devil,
yes,
that made that song.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been the same without that extended, like he could just, and his pipes, he could just hold that note for days. He still can.
Yes, he can.
Great guy. I got to meet him in 2017 for the first time. Just a humble dude. So cool. Yeah. So yeah, Michael Anthony, right there, and he did the part that they wanted, which is what it was all about in Van Halen. You already had the star drummer and the star guitar player, but they needed somebody who could be the glue. And that's where Michael came in. He is the glue that Van Halen was missing for all those years.
But he was a vocalist before Van Halen, wasn't he, I think, from what I've heard?
That very well could be. I have never really delved too much into the history of Michael, although, should he ever want to be on my podcast, then I will most definitely look up everything I can beyond Wikipedia about him.
When this episode comes out, I will tag him in it so that he hears you saying that.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So his signature picture, I got one for my son, and then I've still got my picture when I got to meet him. It was an epic moment. It was really cool.
It was. That's cool. So what advice then would you give to people starting out in podcasting for the first time?
Sure. For the first time, do it.
Yep.
Get an idea. What's your passion? What do you enjoy? What is something that you really feel you would like to share with people? Don't consider whatever you want to share as being something they would not have interest in. With how diverse podcasting is, there is going to be an audience for what you have in your mind and in your thoughts to do with it. So first off, go with that. Second, find a good podcast platform host. Yeah, and what I mean by that is, whichever platform you're using for your base, whether it's Buzzsprout, Podbean, Anchor, Spreaker, research podcast platforms and find one that works for you getting started. Work with a free one. It might be a little limited in what it allows you to do at first, but it'll allow it to grow for you to do it. The next part with that is start with the gear you have. Again, I'm OCD and working around professional audio equipment since the early 90s. And with the background I aforementioned with my dad, just for me, wanting to have the right equipment in place was very important. Now, to add to that, I am a musician. I play guitar. I've been playing guitar, again, since the late 80s, early 90s. So part of what I'm using actually started off as gear for just my own personal studio. So before everything else happened and I was gainfully employed by that music company, I had already started to slowly build my studio area. But a good half of it came after separation with them and realizing that podcasting was where the next step was I really wanted to focus on. And thankfully, with the support of my wife, it happened. So start with what you have. If it's a microphone on your laptop, use it. There's editing programs that a lot of places like Anchor or Podbean offer that are built right into their website. Audacity is an easy program to use as well. That's probably the most popular and free one. And it just makes it real easy for you to get out what you want to. So find a good piece of software, use what you have, use what you know and love.
Wow, that's great. Anyway, Dave, how can people find out more about you and your podcast?
Well, one of the easiest ways is to go to decibolic.com, DECIBOLIC.com. That is my own personal website. I've currently built it using Wix, which made it super easy just to land on the page since I already owned the rights to the name Decibolic. Second, you can go on to Instagram and locate Live Life Loud Podcast. So that's at Live Life Loud Podcast, and I'll pop up. You can also find me on Facebook at Live Life Loud. And I think my Twitter handle is at Live Life Loud 7. So between any of those, you can find me on social media. But the easiest is to go right to decibolic.com because that is my hosting page and you'll find out all sorts of stuff. You can even sign up for my newsletter right there. And I'll be guaranteeing early access to some bonus episodes that I'm working on and also keep you up to date with some good inside information on what's happening here in the Guitar Grotto.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dave, for talking with me, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon. And thank you, everybody, for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us. Right. What do you think, Dave? How did that go?
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
I thought the pickup we could do on start the call a bit earlier, and on Thursday when we've got the trio of pods, and we'll just do like a quick bit of chit chat so that it makes the conversation feel a bit freer and less question answer.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I look for, so we can get started at like 10 instead of 10:30 if that works for you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah,
Perfect. Yeah.
it's the Decibolic Podcast.
Dun dun dun.
Hey.
Hey. Oh, wait, you sound really good too.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Oh, lolly lolly. Sibilance.
How strange! Exactly the same as I used the other day as well.
Well, now you don't have any of the 60 cycle hum going on.
No, I've done a mic check to lose any of that.
Yeah, well, it is pristine, sir.
That's great. It's going to sound so different to the rest of the show.
So different.
Yes.
All right, now I got that out of the way.
That's all right. I'm putting that in.
Yeah, I don't think too many people know where they came from. Plus, it's such a small snippet.
Oh, that's good.
One of my all-time favorite groups, Yellow.
Oh, one of my favourites as well. I need their new album, actually. That's not long come out, I don't think.
Yeah, they've been playing parts on Instagram and stuff. But yeah, I know, right?
Yes.
I like some of their vintage stuff. I won't lie.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, my introduction to them was "Let's Say Yes to Another Excess,"
Okay.
and it was not long after that I found Stella at Tape World.
Wow.
Yes. Back in the days of Tape World and Camelot Music in the U.S.
Yes.
And got that, and oh my gosh, a song on there just hooked me for playing guitar. And now I'm going to totally lose the name of it because I'm thinking too hard.
You're not thinking of that lovely riff on. It's simple but really effective on Vicious Games.
No, not that one. Oh, that one's good too. No,
Yeah.
let me stroll over to my collection here. I like it so much that I'm currently on the hunt for the remastered edition. It's not easy to find here in the States. I got the remastered of 1 Second and the remastered of Let's Say Yes.
Did I ask you about the music in your show the other day or not? I can't remember.
You didn't. We were going to go there, and then you said something about possibly sending me a little pre-question thing. If you send it to me, I missed it.
Right. Yep.
But the Desire.
Yes. Yeah. Lovely.
That is. Oh, there it goes. Wow, that was loud. That was the kicker for me. Just that very bluesy SRV type riff that they do is just incredible.
It is.
I'll do that again for you since I was messing around with audio.
Okay.
So Desire, that bluesy little riff was so SRV, so tasty.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to make that sound. And then I ended up getting into heavy metal bands.
Yeah. It's a bit like, I think it's so cool that the David Bowie album, Let's Dance, you've got Stevie Ray Vaughan and Nile Rodgers on the same album together.
Right.
It's crazy, but you've got two worlds that you wouldn't have thought about working together, and they're there.
Yeah, that was the hook.
Yeah.
For me wanting to play guitar. My dad was into ZZ Top. That didn't hurt either, but Let's Dance was the hook. So was a Tom Petty tune.
Yep.
Dun, dun, oh gosh. Hi, this is Dave, author of Blank Minds for Everybody.
I love Tom Petty.
You got lucky.
Sometimes when I write songs, I'll think there's little bits with Tom Petty where he'll throw in like chord progressions that aren't necessary for the lyrics or the melody. It's just like a link from one bit to another. Like you've got ding 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 into the Great Wide Open, and that which hasn't got anything to do with the song, but it's a hook that's there, and I think that's really really smart and clever.
Right? It's some of that writing that that just adds a little bit of texture and life. Otherwise, everything would be just people bashing 3 chords all the time. Guilty, by the way. But yeah, another one, In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel.
Yes.
He just go dun dun, but instead he goes dun dun dun.
From John, he's one of Louise's favourite actors. He plays it on the Ghetto Blaster, doesn't he? In Say Anything.
You got me there. I have this great ability with movies, and that is to forget them.
I've never seen it. I've just seen that scene in one of these, 80s film classic sort of rundowns and things. We'll have that.
I can watch a movie and then come back to it a year later, and I'm like, I don't remember that part. And it's not because George Lucas did some savvy editing either. I just don't remember it.
Yes, the king of the edit.
Yes. Forever muddling the question about did Han shoot first. Yes. However, I have to be very thankful at this point for Jon Favreau and letting the people in the creative of Mandalorian bring my favorite overhyped character back to life, and that is Boba Fett.
I need to catch up with that. I'm still towards the beginning of season 1, and I'm really looking forward to the return of Luke Skywalker.
Okay, so you know spoilers. Okay.
Unfortunately, I listen to shows and they keep saying things. Yeah.
I see. The minute I see something about something I haven't watched, I click it off or say not interested on YouTube. Just because I don't want to know yet, not until I see it. It's like with WandaVision. I have purposefully not watched anything to do with that anybody puts out.
Right. Okay. So where are you on that? Are you waiting for them to put all the episodes out and then you're going to binge them?
I've been watching them one piece at a time. So I just passed episode 3.
Yeah. It's
kind of quirky. The first episode, personally, I didn't care for at all.
No, I thought the second one was much better.
Yeah. They finally start digging into things finally from that point on.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I don't know. It felt like Star Trek Enterprise. There was a show that had so much fantastic opportunity, and all they did was stay on the ship the whole time. I'm like, where is the duality dynamic? We could be seeing the tension between the Vulcans and the humans back on Earth or in the Federation, but instead we're just getting this one-sided view. So, they fixed everything the way that anybody who doesn't know anything about writing a script does, and that is they introduce time travel. Now, unless you're Doctor Who,
yes,
or the premise of the whole show was time travel to begin with, it's just kind of like, really? You had to go there?
I was listening to Garrett Wang and Robbie McNeil from Voyager, Star Trek Voyager. They actually do their own podcast called The Delta Flyers.
Oh.
Okay, which I started listening to, and it's clever because then they're talking about Star Trek Voyager, about the episodes, and it's fascinating because they're talking about it from the point of view of people that were there making it. So you'll get like behind the scenes tidbits and things like that. And they were saying how, who was it? Robbie McNeil was saying how he still to this day thinks that they made a mistake in making the terrorist organization Maquis people and the Starfleet people friendly too soon. He thinks that they should have stretched that out. He said, because obviously in the real world, it would take a long time in reality for those two people to come to a certain agreement. They'd always be niggling each other.
I agree. Especially, there should have been a lot more attention with Chipotle. I mean,
Chakotay. Yes. Yeah.
I did that on purpose, by the way.
Chipotle. Hey.
Because, one of these days I will write a mockumentary or a mock treatment of Star Trek or Voyager, just like I have one for a very big chain of musical companies here that I have been toying with. And if somebody takes this and runs with it, you can take it. I'll enjoy the show and laugh. But the show is going to be centering around a music store called Fiddle Middle. So you can figure it out from there, Fiddle Middle. And it's going to be set with kind of a future retro medieval type setting. That was the whole concept behind it, just to make it so bizarre and dorky.
future retro medieval. So would that make it a bit steampunky?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it'd be somewhere in the steampunk, but be like, what if we never progressed past the 1900s? Automobiles never really happened, and combustion engines didn't come around. Or what happens is they start getting introduced in this time period, but it's 100 years later.
Wow.
So just something kind of fun. So you've got the brainy people, and you've got the internet, but you don't have combustion engines. So,
as they say on one of the shows I listen to, that is a great bit to start from.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah, I've got all sorts of things like that floating around in the brain of Dave.
Yeah.
That's what I call my log. But anyhow, okay. So questions. Go.
Yeah, we're better out because we've got the other one with Gil in 11 minutes, haven't we?
Yeah, this is Dave. I derail easily, and I already had a third cup of coffee.
I need another cup of coffee. Dear me.
Well, hello.
Hello. It's been a while. Where's Gil?
Right.
Where's Gil? Dear me. Let's see if I can find him online somewhere.
Sure. I did run us a couple minutes over on the last call, so.
That's true.
Don't you need your hat?
Where's what?
Don't you need your hat?
Do I need my hat? What for?
You said you've been thinking hat.
Oh, yes, I will need that. Yeah, you're right. Good. Well done. Doing something new. Louise has reminded me. I have an actual hat that we're going to choose something from to discuss.
Can you pick it up?
Nice. That's good. Because, I was going to be all pro about this and listen to our previous conversation, but instead I realized I had to put the third leg piece in the center of my 6-foot-long table at the back of my desk so it stopped sinking. And that led to a complete rearrangement of how all of my gear was laid out on my desk.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to get to everything now, but it was a total waste of time.
Come on then, where are you, Gil? Come on.
All right.
Searching Facebook to find him. Is he on Facebook at the moment, or is he? I don't think he's online. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh dear. Gil.
I just heard one of his messages on there. Let's see. Hola. Hi. Hello. There. He's on the Trio podcast thing, so now I've included him in little instant messages there. I don't know, maybe 10:30 came and I was late in getting this off, so now he's like, what are these guys doing? What the what? I mean, it doesn't say he was online anytime recently. Normally it'll tell me, if he'd been on. I thought he was on.
But was it the last time we were talking where we were talking with Gil and I was saying that I still think that old jazz recordings by Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock and Duke Ellington, those, I think that they sound better on vinyl because because you were saying about the drum on A Kind of Blue, weren't you, or something, where the brush on the drum,
yes,
it works with the sound of the vinyl.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It so does. Yeah. And there's still, all the naysayers can say stuff, but there's still this depth that you just cannot reproduce in a bit rate. There's just a depth to those analog recordings because it doesn't have to deal with bit rate or kilohertz. That's not a thought when it comes to how vinyl is etched or how a recording was done on analog audio. Yeah, I mean this vinyl. Speaking of this little vinyl option, it gives you the ability to mimic any record player type noise, anything from the 30s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or modern. And then you can add dust, you can add scratch gain, you can add a warp to it. You can give it a lo-fi mode. You can change the RPM. So it's either sounds like it's on a 33 type noise or 45 or 70, was the other one 72 or whatever that was, 78. So you've got all those options. It's just so weird. And you can add mechanical noise. You can add electrical noise. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gil called me on Zoom on Friday night. He said, have you got 10 minutes? I said, yeah, all right, I'll park up and have a break. And we were saying during that 10 minutes that the funny thing is that Gil's looking at doing this Monday show because he's been influenced by your show.
All right.
Right? Because we were both saying to each other how it's a really nice compact show, and you've got all this that's going on in the show, but it's under 30 minutes. And we were both saying to each other, how do you do that? How do you, and we're both dumbfounded and thinking, how do you fit all that? Because there's so much in there in the half an hour. And we're both, so in a way, he said that was one of his original inspirations for doing this Monday show, where that's going to be half an hour at the most as well. And that's what he's trying. He's been inspired by your show to do that, because he's listening to it every week, Gil is.
Well, I definitely need you to send me that part of the recording that you've just done, because I did not hit record and waiting for Gil. But I'd love to have that little part eventually to play around with or something. But awesome. Well, I'm glad that's exciting to me.
Yeah.
More so than, listeners. I thank you, everybody who listens. I need listeners. That's how I'm going to make it doing this. But when I hear that somebody else has been spurred to an idea or to an action, and now they're going to work on it. So it's exciting to me to hear when people are inspired to go for it. That's what Live Life Loud is all about. Just go for it. Make it happen. Don't wait for somebody else. Don't wait on something to nudge you. I mean, my goodness. I had a good friend who lives in Atlanta who I was talking with, and I had knocked on doors trying to figure out what I was going to do professionally. And he's like, if money was no object and you could do anything, what would you do? And I'm like, well, I want to do something that keeps me at home this time. So touring's kind of out, although it'd be fun. But honestly, now that I've actually given it thought and thrown all these ideas out there, starting a podcast. Yeah. And he's like, well, okay. And do you think you could be successful in that? And I'm like, if I do it right, yeah. So here I am. Now I'm figuring out, how to slowly build it and do it the right way. So I get what they call monetization. So I get sponsorships, but trying to do it in such a way that it's actually worth something to the sponsors. But at the same time, eventually make enough so that it's just enough to cover the house rent. Yep. If that's all I do is cover what it costs, or not house rent, the house mortgage. Yep. If all I make is enough to cover the mortgage while my wife is working, but I'm home for our 19-year-old autistic son. I'm home to take care of everything else around the house. So when she gets home, she doesn't have to think about it. I'm fine with not having to be the traditional model breadwinner of my home. Yeah. And there's a ton of other things that I can do that can spur on from podcasting, doing voiceovers, voice acting, whatever that can come out from that. And it's just, so this is my window of opportunity to invest in it and see if I can get something rolling before I have to make it more of a side project and less of my main focus, which really at this point, I don't want to even think about as an option. Oh, Gil.
I know. I was ready with a funny answer for the question out the hat as well.
Oh, no.
What item could you not live without?
Okay. What item could you not live without, Marv? What item could you not live without, Marv?
I was going to say underpants.
Tra-la-la!
Or boxer shorts, but who needs to know all that?
Sure. Yeah, the undergarment is the important key there. Mm.
That's the garment you can't live without.
Yeah.
Or the item you can't live without. Go on.
I'm actually fully dressed right now, which is not common. Usually by now I'm back into a pair of my pajama shorts or something, but it's a little colder day. So that happened.
That's good. So, what item that you own would you not be able to live without?
Well, you already took underwear.
Sorry, you could take it
That's
again if
okay.
you like, but just don't take mine.
What could I not live without that I own? Dang. That could be that's a hard question, actually, in all honesty. Because everything in my house, I could, if money was no object, I could live without. Probably my glasses. I'm nearsighted, but I can still see well. But I lose a lot of definition once it gets past how far my computer screen is away from my face.
Yes, actually, I need my glasses as well because I can see. So I'm short. Is it short-sighted? So I can't see
Yes.
far away. But also, I need reading glasses as well to be able to read books. So I use varifocals to be able to do both. So my in-between vision is good, but far vision is terrible, and reading vision is not as good. But I can sort of read without the glasses, but it gets painful after a while.
Yeah, my close-up vision is waned a little bit as well, but I refuse to go bifocal because I don't need to. I can sit and read and see things, foot 18 inches away. So, and everything's still crystal clear at that point in focus. My iMac screen being an arm's length away is just a little bit out of focus, but not so much that I can't see what it says.
Okay.
Like I could probably drive if I wanted to without them, but I don't because I like that detail.
Yep. That's the main reason why I've got varifocals is for driving, really, so that I can see so I can see the dashboard.
Oh, okay.
And I can see out onto the road as well. So
yeah, and I'm fortunate enough that the dashboard is just far enough away that in my glasses it still is clean. So that's me. I don't want to grow old gracefully. Just turn the volume. Oh, I can turn the volume down and then it settles. And
that rumble reminds me of. Do you know the musician Jean-Michel Jarre?
I don't.
You don't?
Who's that again?
Electronic musician. He does like synthesizer music. He's done it since the mid-70s.
What's his name?
Jean-Michel Jarre. He's French. He's the son of Maurice Jarre, the film composer.
I will have to look him up now.
You would love his music. It's really good. Particularly his first two albums solo, which would be Oxygen and Equinox.
Ah, very cool.
They are classics in synth music.
I have to look that up. See, Yellow is about as far back as I've gotten with that, to be completely open and honest.
See, you wouldn't know the Japanese group Yellow Magic Orchestra either, then?
No, I don't.
Oh, that's another one to look into.
Oh, that's loud. So this is all just being triggered right from my keyboard. I have an external app that just pulled up that's allowing me to change the sound. But yeah, that's all you need. You could probably do something like that with a little MIDI keyboard, like a little Akai, or just one of those little, I don't know, what are they, $50 pads you plug it in, and you can just use an external little piece of software it comes with, and it would probably let you launch the sounds the way you want to.
I don't think Gil's going to show up, and I can only give us till 5 o'clock anyway, which was the original break-off point anyway.
Okay. So that means like 30 minutes for you? No.
35. Yep, 35 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
So could reschedule for another, and I'll just use bits from this to implant into that episode about Decibolic, the Live Live Loud.
There you go. Yeah. That will work.
It will.
What I will likely do as well, just cut and move them over to that one. All right. So, well, hey, I've got you here. Since we've got this time and we're Sans Gill or Gill Sans. That's the name of a font. Oh, that was bad.
You've said I got you. That's another James Brown reference, like last week when you did the James Brown impression.
Can't help it. It's just you go with what you grow.
Anyway, Dave, I'll let you get on. We've used all that time up now.
Yeah, that's great because I just basically did the interview I wanted to with you. So that just totally worked out to have that extra time. Marv, thank you so much for being
now at least doubled up the length of your episode now.
Marv, thanks for being on Live Life Loud.
And thank you for being on Pods Like Us. Dear, we'll do this as a crossover. They call it a swap, don't they, or something?
Exactly.
Swapcast. Okay. Take care, Dave.
Thank you, Marv.
Thank you, Dave. I'll talk to you very soon.
I look forward.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You never know what it's like. You'd be a clown by now. I'm still standing better than I ever did. Feeling like a true survivor. Feeling like a little kid. Hey, I'm singing over here just to see if I'm annoying enough for it to pop in, but that is so weird. I can hear about you, and I can record you as well. Oh, I can hear about you. Can you hear me? Is that a song by Mike and Mechanics?
So, which would be better? Would it be better if I switch back to the laptop microphone and get closer to the laptop, or keep it this way?
That is, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. We can just go for it the way it is if you're more comfortable, and that way you don't have to worry about where you are. Okay. I totally get that.
I just have to do a lot of noise reduction.
Yeah, because noise reduction isn't doing anything.
No, let's have a look. It says auto on the settings, suppress background noise.
Yeah, and that's just noise coming in from the microphone. So anything that's picking up that's not it's not in close, it tries to push away. Unfortunately, it doesn't fix an internal glitch like what I'm getting.
Oh,
but it's not a big deal. Yeah. We can go without it. We are. Yeah, because I even unplugged my keyboard to make sure it wasn't just something on my side. And unplugged from the power strip, and it was still there. But anyhow, we can do this. Not a big deal.
Right.
I've worked with worse.
So have I. Well, normally when me and you talk, I'm on the phone.
That's so true. That is so strange. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, audio interface or an external microphone, one or the other.
Yep, absolutely. I have actually got an external microphone, but I'd need to dig it out that plugs in. Mind you, I don't know if this laptop actually has a microphone slot. That's
weird. Is it like USB or? Oh well. Anyhow,
yeah, I might have a USB microphone. Yeah, we'll have.
Yeah. That's a rabbit trail.
It is. Yep. I like going down rabbit trails. Yeah. From time to time. Right. Let's have a look then. Anyway. Yeah, yeah.